Okay, let's talk a little bit about our filling that we're going to use for our project. So I normally use beeswax. The ones I've got here are cosmetic grade beeswax pellets, and the reason I bought these is they melt really quickly. You can buy the beeswax in blocks. I find it a big hassle to melt those, or to cut smaller pieces to melt. I don't always want to have a whole jug full of beeswax because it takes a while to melt. So I'm a girl who likes to get my projects done relatively quickly. So yeah, the quicker I can get the process done, the happier I am. And so that's the reason I use pellets. Also, the beeswax, the cosmetic grade one, I find is harder. And when you melt it and you put it into you pour it into these little holes, it sticks to the back of your metal like glue. So I've never had any drama with it melting or whatever. You cannot use candle wax for this. Candle wax contracts when it's cold because it's paraffin based and it cracks. So the last thing you want to do is fill one of your beautiful designs with candle wax because it won't support your design. It'll just create a massive mess. So I use beeswax. I know some people use things like Polyfilla, which I find messy. The reason I don't like using that is once you've filled your design, it's quite tricky to fill it because you have to use a palette knife to scrape it in here. You can get Polyfilla on pieces of your design that you don't want, and trying to wipe that off can scratch your metal. So I don't like a lot of drama, so hence the reason I use beeswax. So what I do is I pop them in a glass jar, my little pellets, and then I pop this jar into a big pot of boiling water. Don't use your best pots for this. I've got an old one that's already, it's got a lot of wax in there because accidents do happen. You will get wax in your pot. So dedicate one pot for your beeswax. So I pop it into the boiling water, and using the double boiling method, my wax melts. And I'll show you when I fill it. I've also got a little glass jar and just a normal syringe, a plastic syringe. And so then once the wax is melted and I've got my little jar with water in it and my syringe in the pot, so that heats up as well, I just use the syringe, pull up a little bit of wax at a time. And then because it's got a small tip, the syringe, I can get into those little designs and just squeeze it in there without making a massive mess. If you want to pour it out, it'll end up messy, so I advise against that. But I'll show you in a second how we do that. Okay, so we've got the wax melting. So I use beeswax, which I pop into a glass jar inside a pot of boiling water. And I also have my little glass jar with water inside it with my syringes. So that just ensures that when the wax is pulled up into the syringe, it doesn't set as quickly, because especially when the temperature is a bit cooler, it can be a challenge with the wax setting inside the syringe. So warm it up, pull up a little bit of wax. So just do this. There we go. So I normally don't pull up more than this. And let's swing you over this side. Right. So, starting in the center of your design, you have to work quite quickly. Just make sure that you have wax in all the raised parts of your design. You also want to make sure that when you put the wax in, it doesn't bulge. So don't overfill it, because then it'll be a struggle to get your mandala to sit nice and flat onto your mounting board or your canvas, or however you decide to mount it. That could be a challenge to get it to make it sit flat. As you can see, the wax sets really quickly, so again, you have to work quite quickly. I mentioned in some of my previous videos that the reason, I'm just going to fill up some more wax, the reason I use beeswax is, number one, it sets really quickly, so it doesn't take ages to dry like some of the other fillers some metal artists use. Some of it can take up to 36 hours to dry. So I like getting my projects done quickly, so I like beeswax. And also beeswax, well, number one, it's a natural product, so so that's good, and it sets into the metal almost like a glue. So once it's set, that's it. It's set. The only time you might have an issue with it, maybe falling out or whatever, is if you didn't degrease it properly. If you use a lubricant, let's say you were working with Pewter, then it's always a good idea to just wipe the inside of your design with some methylated spirits, just to remove any oily residue. Otherwise, that could be a reason why it falls out. But for the rest of it, once it's set, you can see that it sets at room temperature. So yeah, I think it's a fabulous product. Please just don't ever try and use candle wax. Candle wax is not suitable for filling metal designs, as it contracts when it's cold, so you'll ruin your project that way. Okay, so that is the waxing done.